The galaxy was old. Stars had burned and died long before Earth had even learned to make fire. The great empires believed they had seen everything. They had created councils, rules, and laws that shaped every world. To them, order was strength. To them, humans were nothing more than a late race, too young to be trusted with real power. The Council of Worlds had its seat in a massive station built around a blue giant star. Leaders of dozens of species met there to decide what was allowed and what was forbidden. Their words carried the weight of centuries. Armies obeyed their codes. Merchants followed their trade laws. Even wars were fought with rules, as if destruction itself could be controlled by careful agreements. And then came Earth. Humans had entered the galactic stage with clumsy ships and bold voices. They were eager to learn, eager to grow, but never eager to kneel. The Council allowed them space, but only with limits. Earth could trade, but under tax. Earth could build ships, but not heavy ones. Earth could defend itself, but not beyond its borders. Every permission came with a chain. Most humans tried to accept this. They told themselves it was safer this way. Yet in every city, in every colony, there was a quiet fire burning. They had crossed oceans and mountains on their own world by breaking rules. Now the stars themselves seemed locked behind walls of law, and the fire only grew hotter. Captain Myra stood at the edge of that fire. She was young for a commander, with dark eyes that never stopped searching the horizon of space. She stood on the deck of Resolute, Earth's first true warship. It had taken years to build in secret, away from the Council's spies. Every bolt of steel and every coil of wire had been touched by hands that believed humans deserved freedom. Myra ran her hand along the railing, feeling the hum of the engines. She knew the Council would call her ship illegal. She knew they would see her as dangerous. Yet she also knew something deeper: humans would never remain small forever. Her second officer, a broad-shouldered man named Tom, approached. "Scouts report more Drakkar patrols along the border," he said. His voice carried a mix of concern and excitement. Myra nodded. The Drakkar were one of the strongest empires in the Council. Their war fleets were old and disciplined. They believed no one could challenge them because no one dared to break the rules of war. "They think they can scare us," she replied, "but fear is not in our blood." Tom gave a small smile. "Others would call that foolish." "Others," Myra said, looking out into the dark sea of stars, "have never been human." Far from the Resolute, in the chambers of the Council, alien leaders whispered. They had been watching Earth with unease. The humans worked harder than expected, recovered faster from losses, and adapted in ways no law predicted. Reports spoke of mining colonies turning barren rocks into thriving outposts in months, of traders navigating dangerous regions others avoided, of soldiers who trained not just to fight but to improvise. The Council called them reckless. The Drakkar called them dangerous. Yet in quiet corners, smaller species began to call them hope. Myra did not think of herself as a symbol. She thought only of the path ahead. She remembered the history of her people. Long ago, humans had faced kings and empires that told them what they could or could not do. They had crossed deserts, climbed peaks, and sailed oceans because they refused to accept limits. The stars, she felt, would be no different. On the bridge of the Resolute, the crew prepared for another patrol. The ship was small compared to the massive fleets of the Council, yet its spirit was different. Every person on board carried the weight of Earth's pride. They were not fighting for riches. They were not fighting for conquest. They were fighting to prove that humans were not weak. "Course set," Tom reported. Myra gave the order. The engines roared, and the Resolute cut through the dark, a blade of defiance against the silence of space. In that moment, Myra thought of the council halls far away. She imagined the alien leaders sitting in their tall chairs, convinced that laws would protect them forever. They did not yet know that a storm was coming. It was not just a storm of ships or weapons. It was a storm of spirit. A storm born of a people who had never accepted chains, who had never lived by rules written by others. The galaxy was watching. And in its silence, it believed it understood humans. But the truth was still hidden, waiting to be revealed. The truth was that humans did not follow rules, they made them. And soon, the galaxy would learn it through fire, steel, and broken armies. The border between Earth space and Drakkar space was never quiet. The Drakkar Empire sent patrol ships often, showing their power, reminding humans of their place. Most freighters tried to avoid them, obeying the strict rules that the Council demanded. But one small freighter named Dawnlight carried something stronger than cargo. It carried a crew that refused to kneel. The Dawnlight was not a warship. Its hull was patched with old metal, and its engines were tired from long journeys. The crew were not soldiers. They were miners, traders, and workers who had grown tired of paying endless taxes to the Council and being stopped at every border. They only wanted freedom to travel without fear. When the Drakkar patrol appeared, 3 sleek ships glowing with silver armor, the crew knew they had no chance. A voice crackled through their comms. "Freighter Dawnlight, you are in violation of travel law. Power down your engines and prepare for boarding." The captain of the freighter, an older woman named Lena, stood at the center of the bridge. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were steady. She looked at her crew, who stared back at her with fear and anger mixed together. For a moment, she thought about surrender. It would be safer. The Drakkar would take their cargo, maybe even their ship, but they might live. Then she remembered the long years of being pushed down, of being told that humans were too young to stand as equals. She remembered her father's words when she was a child, "One day, someone has to say no." Lena straightened her shoulders. "We will not surrender," she said. Her crew gasped, but no one argued. They were tired of chains. The Drakkar patrol repeated their command. This time Lena answered. "This is a human ship. We will not be boarded." The alien voice hissed with anger. "Then you will be destroyed." The battle that followed was not one the Drakkar expected. The Dawnlight had no heavy cannons, only mining tools and improvised weapons. But the crew fought with a kind of fire the Drakkar had never seen. They overloaded fuel cells to blind enemy sensors. They turned cargo cranes into weapons, smashing one patrol ship that came too close. Fires broke out across their own decks, yet the humans refused to give up. One Drakkar ship was forced to retreat, its hull cracked open by an explosion. The other 2 circled, unleashing blasts that tore the freighter apart piece by piece. The Dawnlight burned, but still it fought. In the end, the freighter was lost. Its engines went silent, and flames consumed its hull. Yet the story did not end there. A distress beacon carried the final message of the crew across the stars. Lena's voice spoke to every channel it could reach. "We are humans. We do not bow. If we must burn, then we burn standing." The message spread faster than the council could block it. Traders carried it to new ports. Miners whispered it on distant moons. Soldiers listened in silence, their hearts stirred. For the first time, the galaxy heard humans speak with defiance. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Myra received the recording. She stood still as Lena's final words echoed through the room. Her crew listened too, their faces pale but their eyes bright. Tom broke the silence. They had no chance. But they fought anyway. Myra nodded slowly. They lit the first spark. She knew what it meant. The council would be furious. The Drakkar would call for punishment. Earth's leaders might even beg her to stay quiet. But she also knew something deeper. Once a spark was lit, fire would follow. The next orders from Earth confirmed her fears. A message arrived, commanding the Resolute to remain within safe borders, to avoid conflict, to obey the rules. Myra read the words, then closed the message without answering. She turned to her officers. The council expects us to stay still. But if we do nothing, the dawnlight will be forgotten. And if we stay silent now, they will believe humans can always be silenced. Tom's hand tightened into a fist. What do you plan, Captain? Myra looked at the star map glowing before her. Beyond the thin lines of council borders lay forbidden space, places humans were never allowed to travel. She traced one finger across it. We go here, she said. The crew exchanged glances. They all knew what it meant. To cross into forbidden space was to break the law of the galaxy. The council would call them criminals. The Drakkar would send fleets to hunt them. But not one person on the bridge spoke against her. At that moment, something unspoken passed between them. They were no longer just a crew. They were the beginning of something larger, something no rule could stop. The engines roared, and the Resolute turned its course away from safety and into the unknown. The stars ahead seemed darker, but also brighter, filled with promise. In the silent halls of the council, alien leaders continued their endless debates, unaware that humanity had already chosen a new path. In their eyes, the rules were unbreakable. In human eyes, the rules were only walls waiting to be climbed. And so the first spark became a flame. The Council of Worlds had ruled for centuries with their laws. Every empire followed them because they feared chaos. The rules said no war could begin without a declaration. The rules said armies must fight in arranged places, far from cities. The rules said young races must remain small until the council gave permission to grow. To the council, these laws kept peace. To humans, these laws felt like chains. When news of the dawnlight spread, the council acted quickly. Sanctions were announced against Earth. Human ships were blocked from trade routes. Taxes were raised higher. Patrols doubled at the borders. The council wanted to crush human pride before it could spread. But instead of breaking, humans adapted. On Earth, factories that once built farming machines now built weapons. On Mars, miners turned deep tunnels into hidden armories. In the asteroid belts, traders learned to move through paths no patrol could follow. Every time the council tried to tighten its grip, humans found a new way to slip free. Captain Myra and the crew of the Resolute were at the heart of this change. Their ship moved like a shadow across forbidden space. They struck at supply depots that fed the Drakkar armies. They cut power lines, stole fuel, and vanished before enemies could catch them. One night, on the bridge of the Resolute, Tom looked at the latest map. Red lines marked the areas the council claimed to control. But dozens of small marks, drawn in white by the crew, showed where humans had struck. We are like sparks in the dark, he said quietly. Myra stood beside him. And sparks can grow into fire. The Drakkar commanders were furious. They had fought many wars before, but always by the council's rules. They sent messages demanding humans meet them in open battle. Myra ignored them. Instead, she used speed, creativity, and surprise. In one raid, the Resolute lured 3 enemy ships into an asteroid field. Instead of fighting head-on, Myra ordered her crew to break apart chunks of rock with mining lasers. The falling debris tore into the enemy hulls, leaving them stranded. In another mission, the crew disguised their ship as a freighter. They drifted close to a Drakkar fuel station, then unleashed hidden cannons that turned the base into rubble. By the time reinforcements arrived, the Resolute had already slipped away into the dark. The Council called these acts dishonorable. The Drakkar called them lawless. Myra called them survival. But not all aliens agreed with the Council. In quiet places, smaller species began to watch with new hope. The Loran, a gentle people long forced to pay heavy taxes, whispered that maybe the humans were fighting for everyone. The Varn, who had been pushed to the edges of trade routes, offered stolen weapons to any human captain brave enough to use them. The galaxy was beginning to change. Still, the cost was heavy. Every battle left scars. The Resolute carried burns across its hull. Crew members worked day and night to keep the ship alive. Myra herself often stood in the engine room, helping repair broken coils with her own hands. She refused to stand apart from her people. One evening, after a raid, the crew gathered in the mess hall. They ate simple food, tired but alive. Tom raised a cup and said, "We fight not because we want war, but because they left us no choice." A young pilot named Rena, her face smudged with grease, looked around at the others. "Do you think anyone out there believes in us?" she asked. Myra met her eyes. "They will. When the chains fall, they will see." Far away, in the grand chamber of the council, leaders argued in frustration. The Drakkar demanded stronger action, even a full invasion of Earth. But others hesitated. They saw how fast humans adapted. They feared that every battle would only make them stronger. The silence in those halls was heavy, but none could deny the truth: something new was rising, and the rules that had guided the galaxy for ages were beginning to crack. Myra did not hear their debates, but she could feel their fear. Each time she looked at the stars, she knew humanity had stepped onto a path no law could block. The chains were breaking, one by one, and once broken they could never be reforged. On the bridge of the Resolute, as the ship prepared for its next mission, Myra whispered to herself, "We are not the ones trapped. They are." The galaxy still believed the Council's laws were unshakable. But the truth was clear to Myra and her crew. Humans had never survived by obeying rules written by others. They had survived by making their own path. And now that spirit was spreading across the stars. The chains that had held Earth were cracking. Soon, they would shatter completely. The Drakkar Empire had grown tired of waiting. Small raids, lost depots, and broken patrols had turned their pride into anger. Their fleets were built for order, for battles that followed clear rules. But against humans, their discipline felt useless. Every time they expected a fight, the humans were already gone. Every time they planned a trap, the humans attacked from a different angle. So the Drakkar decided to end it in one strike. At the council chamber, their commander, Lord Sarek, stood before the gathered leaders. His scales glimmered like polished stone as he spoke. The humans must be crushed. Not with patrols, not with warnings, but with the full force of Empire. One battle will end their defiance forever. The council argued, but in the end, they allowed it. A grand fleet was sent, larger than any human force could imagine. Dozens of warships, armed with weapons that had shattered empires long ago, moved toward the human border. Their target was the frozen moon of Yara, where human colonies had begun to grow. The Drakkar planned to strike there, destroy everything, and show the galaxy that no one could escape the law. On the Resolute, Myra received the news from hidden scouts. She stared at the map that displayed the size of the incoming fleet. Her crew stood in silence. The Drakkar outnumbered them more than 10 to 1. Tom's face was hard. If they reach Yara, the colony will be gone in hours. Rena clenched her fists. We cannot fight them head-on. We will be wiped out. Myra did not speak right away. Her eyes studied the frozen moon on the map. Yara was covered in storms of ice and magnetic fields that made sensors weak. To most fleets, it was a dangerous place to travel. To Myra, it looked like a shield. We cannot meet them in open battle, she said at last. So we will not. We will fight them on our ground, not theirs. The plan was bold, almost mad. The Resolute and a handful of smaller ships moved into the icy storms of Yara. They placed hidden mines inside drifting ice fields. They hid fighters inside caves carved into the moon's surface. Every move was against the Council's war codes, but Myra did not care. She was not fighting to follow rules. She was fighting to survive. The Drakkar fleet arrived with banners raised, as if honor still mattered. Their commander expected a quick victory. But when they entered the storm clouds, their sensors began to fail. The cold and static scrambled their signals. And then the humans struck. Explosions lit up the ice fields as hidden mines tore holes into the first line of Drakkar ships. Fighters burst from caves, attacking from behind. The Resolute darted through the storm like a wolf among blind giants, striking with precision and vanishing before the enemy could return fire. The Drakkar tried to form battle lines, but the storms broke their formations. They fired blindly into the dark, hitting their own ships as often as the enemy. For every human ship destroyed, 2 Drakkar vessels fell. On the bridge of the Resolute, Myra stood calm, giving orders as if she were playing a game she had already won. Strike their engines. Leave them adrift. Keep moving. Never give them the fight they want. Hours passed, and the once mighty Drakkar fleet was in ruins. Ships burned in the frozen sky. Wreckage fell like snow onto Yara's surface. The survivors fled, broken and silent, carrying tales of a battle unlike any they had ever seen. Tom looked around the bridge, hardly able to believe what they had done. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and yet we stand. Myra nodded, though her eyes remained sharp. This is only the beginning. They will return. But now they know we cannot be crushed so easily. News of the battle spread across the galaxy. To some, it was madness. To others, it was a miracle. For the first time, the Council began to doubt its own strength. If a single human fleet could tear apart the Drakkar's pride, then what would happen if more humans rose to fight? Among the oppressed species, whispers grew louder. The humans had stood against an empire and lived. They had broken the rules of war and still claimed victory. If they could do it, perhaps others could too. On Yara, the colonists celebrated as survivors returned. Fires were lit across the frozen plains, not as signals of distress, but as beacons of hope. Children ran to greet the soldiers, their laughter carrying through the cold air. For them, the fear of chains had melted away. Myra watched from the deck of the Resolute as the colony lights glowed below. She knew the Drakkar would never forgive this defeat. She knew the Council would plot new ways to strike back. But she also knew the truth: something had changed forever. The turning point had come. The galaxy could no longer see humans as weak. The storm of Yara had shown what it meant to fight on human terms. And the war was only just beginning. The victory at Yara spread across the stars like fire carried by the wind. Every corner of the galaxy heard whispers of the battle where humans stood against a grand fleet and did not fall. The council tried to bury the news, but stories are hard to kill. Traders told it in hushed voices, miners sang it as they worked, and soldiers repeated it around campfires. For many, it was just a tale of madness. For others, it was a spark of hope. In the hidden valleys of the Loran world, quiet leaders gathered. The Loran were a gentle people, known for music and art, not war. For centuries they had paid heavy tribute to the council, their resources taken while their voices were ignored. Now they looked to the stars and wondered if humans could succeed where they had always failed. "We cannot fight alone," one elder said. "But maybe we do not have to." On the barren moons of the Varn, the story reached a different audience. The Varn were strong, but the council had forced them into poverty by controlling their trade routes. Many of their ships rusted in silence, too old to challenge the empires. Yet when they heard of the human victory, their hearts stirred. "If humans can break fleets," one captain growled, "then we can break chains." While whispers grew, Captain Myra and her crew moved through the shadows of space. The Resolute had become more than a ship. It was a symbol. Wherever it appeared, people believed the impossible might be possible. But symbols alone could not win wars. Myra knew they needed allies. One night, the Resolute received a secret signal. It came from an unmarked moon on the edge of council space. The message was short: "We are ready to talk." Myra studied the coordinates. It was risky. The council could be setting a trap. Yet something in her heart told her this was real. "Set a course," she ordered. The moon was dark and quiet when the Resolute arrived. No patrols, no fleets, only silence. Myra and a small team took a shuttle down to the surface, landing near a cave where the signal had originated. Inside, they found a group of Loran envoys. Their tall, graceful forms seemed fragile, but their eyes carried a strength born of long suffering. One stepped forward. "We have watched what your people have done. You fight without permission. You break the laws that bind us all. For this, we do not fear you. We admire you." Myra bowed her head slightly. "If you wish freedom, we cannot promise it will be easy. But we promise we will not stop." The Loran leader placed a hand over his chest. "Then take this." He offered a data crystal. "It holds the codes to council supply convoys. We cannot fight, but we can give you what you need." Myra accepted it, her heart heavy with the weight of their trust. Later, the Resolute met with Varn captains in the shadow of an asteroid field. Unlike the Loran, the Varn were rough and direct. Their ships were old but still carried weapons. "You showed the galaxy that rules can be broken," one captain said. His voice was deep, like thunder. "Now we will fight at your side. Not for humans. For all of us." The alliance was fragile, bound not by treaties or councils but by a shared hunger for freedom. Yet Myra knew this was stronger than any law. Back on the Resolute, Tom looked at the growing list of allies. "We are no longer alone," he said. Rena smiled faintly. "But the more allies we gain, the more the council will fear us." "They should fear us," Myra answered quietly. "Because fear is the first step to change." The council indeed was beginning to tremble. Reports reached their halls of humans working with outsiders, of convoys disappearing, of colonies rising in rebellion. Leaders who once sat proudly in their tall chairs now whispered in worry. Lord Sarek of the Drakkar slammed his claws against the council table. This is what happens when you let humans live. They spread like fire. Crush them before it is too late. But some voices were no longer certain. A few dared to ask, what if the humans are not the problem? What if the rules are the problem? In those halls, silence fell heavier than before. Meanwhile, the alliances grew stronger. Human engineers repaired old Varn ships, turning them into weapons of war once more. Lauren scouts provided secret information about council routes. Other small species sent food, medicine, and shelter. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy began to feel the stirrings of unity not under the Council's law, but against it. On the bridge of the Resolute, Myra looked out into the endless stars. She felt the weight of what was happening. She was not just commanding a ship. She was guiding a movement. A storm was rising, and humanity was at its heart. She whispered to herself, not for the crew but for the stars to hear. We were alone once. Not anymore. Together, we will break every chain. And across the galaxy, in shadows and silence, countless voices waited for the moment to rise. The Council of Worlds had never known fear. For centuries, their laws had controlled empires and kept order. But now, reports arrived from every corner of the galaxy. Human fleets striking convoys. Varn warships rising again after years of silence. Lauren scouts sabotaging supply lines. Small colonies refusing to pay tribute. The laws that once seemed unbreakable were crumbling like old stone. In the Grand Chamber, the leaders argued louder than ever. Lord Sarek of the Drakkar slammed his claws against the table. The humans are a disease. Every day we wait, it spreads. We must declare them an outlaw race. No rights, no mercy, only destruction. A counselor from another empire spoke with unease. You said the same before Yara. You promised their end, but instead it was your fleet that fell. The words stung, but Sarek pressed on. This time will be different. We will send every army, every ship. We will burn their world until nothing remains. The vote passed. Humanity was declared outlaw, cut off from all galactic rights. Any species that stood with them would face the same fate. It was the Council's final attempt to hold control. But instead of fear, the declaration fueled rebellion. Across the stars, oppressed species no longer whispered, they acted. Some smuggled weapons to human fleets. Others rose in open defiance. The collapse had begun. On the Resolute, Myra read the Council's message. Her crew gathered around her. The words on the screen burned like fire: outlaw. Enemy of all order. Rena broke the silence. They want to erase us. Tom's eyes narrowed. They think if they call us criminals, the galaxy will turn against us. But the galaxy is already turning against them. Myra closed the message and stood tall. They can call us whatever they want. Names will not stop what has begun. The next weeks were a storm. Battles erupted across countless systems. Human fleets, though smaller, struck with speed and creativity. Instead of fighting where the Council expected, they attacked where it hurt most: fuel depots, communication hubs, command stations. Every victory was a cut against the Council's control. One raid brought the Resolute and its allies to the edge of a vast Council shipyard. Dozens of unfinished warships floated inside, guarded by heavy patrols. A normal army would never dare attack. But Myra had no interest in normal war. We cannot fight them head on, Tom warned. Myra nodded. We will not. We will make their strength into weakness. Her plan was simple yet daring. Instead of aiming at the guard ships, they fired at the half-built warships. Explosions rippled through the yard as fuel cells and engines erupted. The patrols panicked, their formation breaking as they tried to save their own assets. In the chaos, human and Varn ships slipped in, taking supplies and striking at the heart of the facility. By the time reinforcements arrived, the shipyard was nothing but twisted metal drifting in the dark. The council called the attack barbaric. But for every insult they threw, more voices joined humanity's side. The Drakkar launched massive armies to crush the movement, but on the ground, they found a new kind of enemy. Human soldiers fought like no other species. They dug traps, built hidden tunnels, and turned cities into battlefields where every corner was dangerous. Even without numbers, they held the line. A Drakkar general, frustrated after weeks of failure, admitted in private to his staff, "They do not fight as soldiers. They fight as if every stone and shadow belongs to them." How do you defeat such people? On the Resolute, Myra knew the truth. Humanity was no longer fighting alone. The allies who had once hidden in shadows now fought openly. The Loran guided fleets through secret star paths. The Varn hammered council forces with renewed pride. Even small colonies, once voiceless, now raised banners of resistance. But with victory came cost. Ships were lost, colonies burned, and lives were taken by war. Each loss weighed heavy on Myra. She stood often in silence, staring at the names carved onto the walls of the ship. Yet even in sorrow, she found strength. One night, Tom found her alone on the observation deck. "We are paying a high price," he said softly. Myra turned to him, her eyes tired but steady. "Freedom always has a price." The council thought their rules would last forever. But rules mean nothing if no one believes in them. And the galaxy does not believe anymore. The collapse of order was no longer a question. It was happening. Old empires trembled. Laws that once chained billions now shattered under the weight of rebellion. And at the center of it all stood humanity, small in number, young among the stars, but unshakable in spirit. As the Resolute prepared for its next mission, Myra looked out into the endless dark. "They wanted to erase us," she whispered. "Instead, they erased themselves." The fall of the council was close. The storm that began with sparks was now a fire consuming the galaxy. The galaxy was quiet in a way it had never been before. The great halls of the Council of Worlds were empty, echoing only with the whispers of failure. Empires that had once ruled with iron fists were broken, their fleets scattered, their soldiers defeated. Laws that had controlled billions were meaningless. And at the center of it all stood humanity. Captain Myra of the Resolute looked out at the stars from the command deck. The victories had been many, but the cost had been heavy. Ships were gone. Friends had fallen. Colonies lay in ruins. Yet humanity still stood. They had fought not for glory, not for power, but for freedom. And now, the galaxy could no longer deny it. Across the stars, humans were no longer just a young race. They had become a symbol of defiance and hope. Other species, once silent under the Council's rule, now spoke openly of freedom. Alliances that had begun in shadows were now strong and open. Ships carried flags of humans and allies together, a signal that the old laws had ended. Myra remembered the first spark, the freighter Dawnlight, the battle at Yara, the first raids in forbidden space. Those small acts had grown into a storm that even the Council could not stop. And now, as humans stood victorious, it was clear that the galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humans did not follow rules, they made them. The council sent one last envoy to meet with the humans. They arrived in silence, their ships no longer towering, their banners lowered. On the ice moon of Yara, Myra met them. Leaders from the council, small in number and humbled in spirit, approached with caution. "We come to discuss terms," said a representative of the Drakkar, voice heavy with respect and fear. Myra looked at them calmly. "Terms are simple. The galaxy belongs to those who can shape it, not to those who sit in chambers counting stars and rules. You may rebuild if you choose, but only where the people will allow it." The envoy hesitated. The council had controlled countless worlds for centuries. And now they were being told they could no longer command. It was a new world, a world shaped by humans and their allies. Back on Earth, celebrations were quiet but heartfelt. Colonists returned to their homes, rebuilding not as subjects, but as free people. Cities on Mars and the moons thrived again, powered by human ingenuity and alliance with other species. Humanity had not only survived, but had also become a beacon of hope across the galaxy. On the bridge of the Resolute, Myra addressed her crew. "We did not win because we had the strongest weapons. We won because we never followed the rules that were meant to limit us. Every act of courage, every battle fought our way, every ally we trusted has brought us here." Tom nodded, his expression proud but tired. "They will remember this. Every species will remember what humans can do." Rena, the young pilot, smiled faintly. "Do you think it will last?" Myra looked out at the stars, endless and bright. "It will last as long as we remember who we are. Humans do not wait for permission. We do not bow. We make the rules, and we protect them." The galaxy had changed forever. Former enemies now watched humans with respect, even awe. Borders no longer mattered in the same way, and old armies could not move without thinking twice. Humanity had rewritten the balance of power not with brute force alone, but with creativity, courage, and unwavering spirit. In quiet moments, Myra thought of those who had fallen along the way. She walked through the halls of the Resolute, touching names carved into the walls, remembering their courage. Every life lost had been a sacrifice for freedom, and their memory became part of the new law of the galaxy, the law that humans created themselves. As she returned to the command deck, Myra smiled faintly. Ahead lay countless stars and countless possibilities. The galaxy was no longer a place of rules imposed by others. It was a place where humans and those who stood with them would shape their own future. The final council chambers were abandoned. Ships once proud of their order now carried humans and allies. New trade routes opened, new colonies rose, and old empires learned humility. The galaxy would never again see humanity as weak or young. They had proven through fire and broken armies that the spirit of humans could not be contained. Myra looked at the crew of the Resolute and nodded. "This is our legacy. We have not only survived. We have shown the galaxy what it means to be human. We do not follow rules. We make them." And for the first time in centuries, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if acknowledging the rise of a new law, one written by courage, freedom, and humanity itself.